I want to thank each and every one of you who came to a meeting, who volunteered, who helped hold a door, who helped lug a box, who gave a smile, who brought a friend, the folks who facilitated the workshops, the speakers, the chair people. It wouldn't happen without us, all of us. And I am so grateful to be a part of Al-Anon. I, as part of the convention committee, I had the privilege of listening to a lot of tapes of people who come around and share their experience, strength, and hope at functions like this. And our committee, being our committee, we all participated. So we passed those tapes around all fall, and we finally got to one of the meetings, or 2 or 3 of the meetings, where we came up with our list of 3 finalists, our favorite 3. And I was so excited because Joan was number 1. So I raced home and I called Joan, and then I called her again, and I called her again. And every time I called her, I got her voicemail. And it got to be so comforting just to hear her voice. But finally we did make contact after a couple of weeks, and she, in her warm, wonderful way, said, well, yes, there was the fall assembly, and then there was the 12-step program, and then there was this retreat, and then my sponsees, and then we do this outreach. And I said, phew, so that's how you get there. I am really honored and privileged to introduce Joan L. from Long Island, New York. Joan.
I thought she almost sounded like me there for a minute when she said Long Island. Hi, Massachusetts.
Hi, Joan.
Thank you for choosing me. It's an honor and a privilege to be here tonight. My name is Joan, and I'm a very grateful member of the Worldwide Fellowship of Al-Anon and Alateen family groups. And wow, I look out tonight and I didn't expect all these people. They were just people at tables, but now there's people that filled the room. Thank you for being here, and I hope I don't bore you tonight. Where do I begin? Where do I begin by thanking all of you for inviting me to this invitation to happiness? You should have sent me an invitation with that on it, because that's such a beautiful, beautiful flag. And, poster that you, not poster, what is it? A banner that you made. And it is an invitation to happiness, because I have found happiness all weekend long. I've been laughing and meeting people. I never knew I knew so many people in Massachusetts. So this is wonderful, and that's what happens when you're in service for a long time, because you go to other things other than conventions, other than meetings, and you meet people, and you're around. People stop me in the hallway. They said, where did I meet you before? At a regional service seminar, at a convention? Yeah, because I'm there, and I'm so grateful that I can be there. I want to thank my friend Tina. This is my friend for about 20 years in Al-Anon. And she used to travel with my husband Joe and I when we went to conventions. She was always eager to go to different places. So now that Joe passed away, she says, Joe would kill me if I didn't drive you. So she pulled up in my driveway yesterday morning about 7:30 and grabbed my luggage, which I had outside and waiting in the driveway. And we left. And as we left, she says, oh, bring this inside first. And I says, oh, I have the house locked up. And she gave me a little bag. She says, okay, I'll just put it on the back seat and leave it there. No problem. Forgot about it, But I'll tell you that little story later. I have a lot of little stories to tell you. You know, I came from the Bronx. I don't know if anybody here is from the Bronx. You see that? There she is, my friend Kathy and her sister Marge. Marge lives here in Massachusetts, and Kathy still lives in the Bronx today. And before this meeting started tonight, she came running up to me with this little white bag and with a note on it, telling me she's here to give me love and support, because last night we sat back there during the meeting, and I forgot what I even wore, but I had my red and white polka dot scarf on. And I said, wow, I wish I would have taken another scarf with me for tomorrow night, because I can't wear this red and white polka dot with my purple outfit. So Kathy ran out tonight and brought me this purple scarf with polka dots. Kathy and Marge, thank you. I love you both. I love scarves and I love polka dots, and that's a story too that I'll tell you when we get to it. Glenn told me I have to speak for an hour. Hi, Glenn. So I'm going to try to fulfill this commitment. I was born up in the Bronx, and my childhood was very quiet, you know. My dad, I could say that he was an alcoholic, but who am I to say? He died when I was 13, not from alcoholism. He died from TB. In those days, people died from a disease like that because there was no, help that they could get. So Mom went out to work, and I was left home with my younger sister. My older brother was then just married, and we lived in this Bronx apartment, and we had a very happy childhood. We didn't even have a TV in the house, and it was a few years later that Mom went to one of the stores and brought home a TV set for us, a black and white TV. I wasn't allowed to date until I was 16. My sister got to date when she was 13. Things change, being the oldest one, you don't get away with as much, but that was okay. And so by the time I was 16 and 17, I was looking for that handsome Prince Charming. And when I was 18 and a half, my girlfriend Loretta called me one night, and she said to me, Phil brought a friend home from the Navy this weekend. Her fiancé was in the Navy. And would you like to go out on a double date? Oh, I said, yeah. I was dating somebody, but mad at him for one thing or another. Who knows? And I went out spitefully. And, she says, his name is Joe, and he'll be there to pick you up at 7 o'clock. I said, fine. And that Bronx apartment that I lived in with my mom and my sister, the doorbell rang, and I went to the door, and there he stood. Oh, wow. I heard it today, but you haven't heard anything like this. Because there he stood, this bronzed superhero in a navy white uniform. And there's nothing like a guy in uniform to turn a girl on. Even if he's in his BVDs, he turned me on. But there he stood in that white uniform and his bronze complexion. And I took a quick inventory, and I says, wow, I got heels on, and this guy's about the same size as me. I better go in and put on a pair of flats. Ran into my bed. I says, I'll be right back. Ran in my bedroom, took off those high heels, and put on a pair of ballerina slippers. We had them. And you teenagers know about those ballerina slippers, because I have some teenagers in my house. They still wear them. Not in my house, but my grandchildren. So I went and put them on, and we went out on our first date. But I looked at this man, and there's a page in the book from the other program that I'm not allowed to say. And there's a page, and it says, if you want what I have, and you're willing to go to any lengths. Well, I wanted what he had. I really didn't know what he had. But I know it was something at 19 that would make me happy. So you figure that out. That's, what we in Al-Anon, sometimes we have to come to Al-Anon to find out. And I went out on my first date and fell madly in love, and, and that's how it all started. And that was in September. And I was tall. I was 5'6", and I had brown, mousy hair, but I had natural blonde streaks in and blue eyes, and I had a nice tan because we lived up in the Bronx near Orchard Beach, and we used to spend a lot of time at Orchard Beach. And we started dating, and he was stationed in the USS Wisconsin ship it was stuck in the mud in the New York harbor, so he was stuck in New York for a while. And we dated, and he called every day, and we went out a few times a week, and I fell madly in love. And in February, I was invited to a girlfriend's wedding. In fact, I was in the wedding party. I was one of the bridesmaids. And those years, girls got married very young. They got married 19, 20 years old. Everybody was married. And every wedding was the same, those Italian football weddings, where you'd go in on the middle of the table, they'd have a bottle of bourbon, a bottle of wine, and a pitcher of beer. And then they'd bring out the trays of sandwiches, and everybody would, I guess, throw sandwiches around. I don't know what they did. But everybody ate and drank, and that was it. So I invited Joe to be my guest at the wedding. And he came as my guest, but I was up on the dais, and he was down on the floor. And, oh, God, I'm watching him. He looked so handsome and cute and everything. And all my girlfriends were then getting engaged and married and all. I really wanted that to happen, but he never asked me. And but that night I was watching him, and he was drinking a lot and dancing, coming up and getting me and dancing and everything, and we were having a good time. Then it came the time for the bride to throw the bouquet out, and I went out on the floor like all the single girls. I don't think they even do those things today at weddings. And I caught that bouquet, and I says, "Tonight's the night. Tonight's the night." And then, it came time for the guys to go out and catch the garter, because they took the garter off the bride's leg. And I see all you white-haired ladies like me are recognizing this, you see. But the younger people, they don't even know what we're talking about. Well, anyway, all the guys went out on the floor, and they're going to throw this garter, but Joe did not catch that garter. The little Guido down front caught it. And what do? They put me on a chair in the middle of the dance floor, and they give this guy that caught the garter permission to get on his knees and put it on my leg. And everybody is, this Gypsy Rose Lee music. I don't know where it came from, but it was piped in. And all of a sudden, everybody's clapping and saying, "Higher, higher." And out of the corner of my eye, I see this nice little guy, Joe, come running across the room, pick this guy up that's on his knees, and he slugs him. And the photographer snaps pictures, and I'm dying. I'm embarrassed. I'm mortified. I hate him now. You see, that love turns to hate on the same hand. Don't we use that in Al-Anon, too, with the disease? That love turns to hate. So, I looked at him and I says to him, "I hate you. I never want to see you again. Get out of my life." And I ran out of the place and asked the two young fellas that were outside if they'd drive me home. And as I walked into the Bronx apartment, Mom says to me, "Joe called here 5 times. And I says, "Well, if he calls again, tell him that I'm not home." And Mom, I don't know, Al-Anon wasn't even around then. She must have been an Al-Anon member from way back, because she says to me, "Joan, you take care of your own problems." And in those days we had that little phone on that kitchen wall with the little short cord. So you get the phone call and everybody in the house hears your phone conversation. Your kids today are so lucky with your cell phones and your Blackberries and everything else. You have privacy. We had no privacy, not even anonymity in those days. And that phone sure did ring, and not to wake up the whole house, I answered it. I said, "Hello." He says, "Joan, I'm so sorry that happened, and it'll never happen again. I had 2 beers instead of 1. Thank you." And I believed him. And the next thing he said to me was what I was waiting to hear. "Will you marry me?" Right over the phone. Isn't that romantic? And I said yes, because I remembered that I still wanted something that he had, and I didn't know what. So there we were planning a wedding, a few months later, and this was in February, and we got married that September in one of those football weddings. And it was wonderful. It was wonderful. But then, we went home together every night. We went home together every night, and I began to see things that had never dawned on me before because I didn't know anything about alcoholism. And this was back in 1956. So that's a long time ago. And things, they just progressed. I could tell you about the window watches, the waiting for him to come home, the going out to the bars in the middle of the night looking for him. And then I could tell you about 3 months later, I says to myself, maybe we need a baby. Maybe a baby will keep him home, Joe, let's have a baby. He says, no, Joan, we're too young. I was 19, we were 19 and 20. And I says, well, let's just try once. There's good Catholics. We tried once, and we got pregnant. We must have tried a lot because we went on to have 7 babies. But, we had that little girl, and 9 months later, did it bring him home? No, it brought him to take me to the hospital, and it let him take me home from the hospital a week later. They used to keep you 5 days then. But he got awfully thirsty at home, as I found out later, and he had to go out and drink again. He didn't like to drink in the house. He liked to drink at the bar. And I had to allow that to happen, but you see what? I had Debbie. Joe wasn't home, but I had Debbie. I had a brand new baby girl, a lovely baby girl to take care of. And that's what happened. So along that merry road, I don't have to tell any of you our drunk-a-log and what we went through, and down that long road of desperation, of anger, of hate, that love turned to hate so easily, the meals that were left uncooked in the kitchen on the stove, or waking me up at 3 o'clock in the morning for not a leftover. He didn't want a leftover. He wanted a complete meal. One night he came home at 3 o'clock in the morning and he wanted me to make him chili. And as a good, dutiful wife, so I wouldn't wake my little girl up. And when he used to come home, the funniest thing used to happen. We used to live in an apartment, and we had a big Irish setter dog, a beautiful Irish setter, lean dog. And we had fish tanks in the living room because he liked to breed fish. And I had beautiful plants because I always loved flowers. I still do. And when he'd come home yelling and screaming, even at 3 o'clock in the morning, the Irish setter would try to get under the bed, and he never fit under the bed. Duke never fit under the bed, so the bed would rattle a little bit, and the fish would go hide behind the rocks, and the plants would droop. Because we have to remember something. Alcoholism is a family disease. It affects all living creatures, man or animal or plant. So this one night, he insisted that I make him chili, and I decided to make this chili at 3 o'clock in the morning, and thank God I had the ingredients, and I got the cast iron frying pan on the stove, and I'm making this chili, and he sits at the kitchen table, and he's got his work clothes off now, and he's sitting there in his shorts and his T-shirt, and he's demanding this dinner, and he's banging his hands on the table, and I'm saying, it'll be ready soon, and as I'm saying this, I'm seeing his head bob down, lower and lower and lower into the dish. And then all of a sudden, he's asleep at the table. And I was so angry. I don't know about any of you, if you got so angry and you lost your temper. And it seemed like a good thing to do, to pick up that cast iron frying pan and really put him to sleep. And so I did. I hit him over the head, and the chili splashed all over, and he slid off the chair onto the floor. But being a good wife, I wasn't in Al-Anon then, being a good wife, I went to the bedroom and got a pillow and put it under his head on the floor, and then got a blanket and covered him, and I didn't check his pulse or anything. I didn't know. And I went to bed. And in the morning when he woke up rubbing the side of his head, and I knew there was something there, and my guilt made me say to him, you came home like that. And it wasn't until I did my list of people that I hurt that I attended to that. And I just didn't go and tell him. I told him in front of a whole convention full of people. I made my amends. And he was shocked because I kept that big secret for a lot of years. That was my secret towards him. Didn't mean I didn't love him. I loved him a lot. But maybe a month later, 2 months later, he came home one night after being away for 3 days. He used to take these little jaunts on the weekend, take Duke out for a walk on a Friday afternoon, take the poor dog out. The dog loved beer, too. And they'd go down to the local bar, and he'd come home 3 days later, and the both of them would be really in a mess. But this one day, he came home on a Monday afternoon, never made work Monday, came home on a Monday afternoon, and he says to me, as he's standing in the doorway, and he's bobbing on both sides of the doorway because he couldn't stand up straight. And before I could say anything, and all I remembered that day was my mom always saying to me, Joan, when you're arguing with Joe, do you ever look in the mirror and see your face? She says, you remind me of a fishmonger's wife. And I says, what is a fishmonger's wife? She says, you're worse than he is. He's just drunk. He'll go in and go to sleep. But it's your mouth that just stimulates the argument and stimulates everything. Nobody ever told me those things. But I remembered that day, so I didn't say anything. And I says to him, what do you mean it's New York that gets me drunk? He says, I figured it all out. And I says, where? Were you in church? Did you have a revelation or what? He says, no, I was sitting at the bar with my friends and we were talking and I figured it's New York that gets me drunk. And I said, so what do you want to do, Joe? He says, let's move. There's that geographic. I says, where would you like to go to? He says, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Now, I didn't know that was the beer capital of the world. But he did. So, a week later, we had Santini Brothers come, and they packed up all our furniture, and we moved to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He got a transfer with his job, and we moved. And we moved. The wife, the child, and the alcoholic. We moved, and we rented a house with option to buy, and I thought this was going to be our happy ever after. I had no family out there, no one to turn to. Things just got worse. They got progressively worse. Didn't know about Al-Anon. God, I wish there were public service announcements then like they have today. All these PSAs on TV are wonderful, And all these magazine ads and little TV clips about different things that you could do with this disease today. But there was nothing and no talk in the family. I never even told my mom a lot of the stuff that was going on. Because, when we were kids and there was problems in the family with aunts or uncles or cousins or anything, and they were put into hospitals because they were having a so-called nervous breakdown, nobody ever talked about alcoholism or they drink too much. Nothing was ever said about it. It's all that push it in the closet, sweep it under the rug. Shh, don't talk about it. Keep it to yourself. Don't tell anybody what goes on in this house. That's the message that I got as a child. So I kept it. I grew up with it. Well, anyway, things got so bad out in Milwaukee, I finally broke down to my mom and told her how unhappy I was. And how unhappy I was here I had a little girl who was then 4, and I was 6 months pregnant with my second child. Things were bad. And Joe, finally, his job was on the line, and he says to me, would you like to move back to New York? And I said, yes, I would. And my mom said, if you'd like to come back, I'll give you 1 bedroom in my apartment. Mom lived in a 5-room apartment. And she took us back. And, when I look back now, we would have been homeless if Mom didn't take us in. Our furniture went into storage. We had nothing. We came home in our little old car on a wing and a prayer. But in that trunk of that car, there was a 12-pack of beer, and there was a bottle of bourbon. And every so often when we'd stop for gas or whatever we'd stop for, he'd go back and open up the trunk, and I'd say, what the heck is he going back there for? I never knew he was drinking along the way. That's denial sometimes, too. We do know, but we don't want to face it. We don't want to realize what's going on. So we came home to New York, and Mom gave us a room in her house, in her apartment. And the first thing Joe did that day is he went and found a job. He always worked. And he found a job and started working the next day. And that was on October of 1961 that we came back to New York. And I didn't know what to do with myself, and Mom used to tell me all the time, Joan, just pray. Just pray for Joe. Keep praying for him, something will happen. So I decided to go down to church every day. We lived very close to Immaculate Conception Church. And I went down there every day pushing my little girl in her carriage. And I used to start with the saints because I was angry at God. You see, I prayed for this handsome man to marry me, but I didn't pray for what was happening in our marriage. I was very unhappy with what was going on. It wasn't romantic anymore. So I started praying to the saints. I figured, well, let me pray to St. Patrick, because his mother is an Irish woman. She's red-haired, blue eyes. She looked like Maureen O'Hara, but she was a drunk, too. She was an alcoholic. She died an alcoholic. But I started praying to St. Patrick. Oh, St. Patrick, if you would get Joe to stop drinking, I'll make all the novenas to you. All these novenas. And, you know, a month later, nothing happened. He was still doing what he was doing. And I says to myself, something is wrong with me. There's the insanity of this disease. Something's wrong with me. I'm praying to St. Patrick's. He's Irish. He's probably a drunk, too. Why am I praying to him? Let me turn to St. Anthony, because Joe's father was Italian. Maybe he could do a little more. Oh, St. Anthony, I said for a month and lighting these candles, if you get Joe to stop drinking, I'll name all my children after you. I had one little girl and one on the way. Be careful what you pray for, because we went on to have 7 children, but 5 of them are girls. But every one of them have a middle name of Ann. I cut it short a little bit, but I try to keep up to it, you know. And anyway, so I prayed to St. Anthony, and that didn't happen either. Then it was the Christmas holidays, and things were bad. They were horrific. Not bad, they were horrific. You know, the dog was just as drunk as Joe all those weeks, you know. And then the miracle happened, and I always say to people, don't quit before the miracle happens. Don't ever quit before that miracle happens, because it is going to happen. If you keep praying, God hears our prayers. You know, how many times I brought broken dreams to God? You know, I just gave him everything and talked to him about them and asked him to please help. Please do what you can do. But how many times I took them back or didn't let them go all the way? And the answer I would get was, you know, you never really let them go, Joan. How am I going to do anything? But on January 1st, 1962, Joe decided he was going to stop drinking. And he called the VA hospital. At first he thought he had some sort of a brain tumor. And I went down there, you know, 9 months pregnant. I'm down there with him, and we're going through all these physical exams and everything. And the doctor says to him, Joe, I want you to see a counselor. I think you have a problem with alcohol. How much do you drink? You know, it was coming out of his pores. And we went down on the subway, the New York City subway. When the train was rattling, he was rattling. I don't know who was rattling more. But we went down, and they sent him home, and they told him to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. They didn't send him to a counseling center, to just go to Alcoholics Anonymous. So he came home, and he called Intergroup in New York City, and they gave him a meeting that night to go to. And they said, somebody will call you. And that afternoon, a person called, and he says, hello, my name is Jean, and meet me so-and-so. I was so happy. He was going to go out that night, and he was going to be with some Alcoholics Anonymous people, and I guess that meant that he'd stop drinking. So he left that night, and he asked me for money for car fare, and I gave him the money for car fare. And he was gone about an hour and a half, and the phone on that kitchen wall rang, that little short, you know, phone. And I picked it up, and the guy on the other end said, hello, is this Joan? I said, yes. He says, this is Jean. Oh, Jean. He says, yeah, I'm Joe's sponsor. I said, oh, he met his confirmation sponsor? I didn't know about sponsorship. He didn't answer that question, but he says to me, you got any booze in the house? And I said, of course, it's New Year's. He says, get rid of it. But when he said, you got any booze in the house? I said, oh, my God, they're all going to come back here now and drink. because I figured they're all alcoholics and they're going to come back. You know, if we're uneducated, we don't know anything. I'm so grateful today that I'm educated, that I got an education, that I wanted to, that I had the willingness to do it. So anyway, Jean came back that night and talked to us for about 3 hours in Mom's living room. Even Mom listened. She was so attentive. And by the time it came for Jean to go home, I wanted Jean to stay and Joe to leave. Because then I liked what Jean had. You see, because he was a sober man, living as a sober man, working hard every day. He wasn't married. He carried himself well, and I wanted that for my husband. So now I knew what I wanted, you know. Joe kept going to meetings, and I'm so grateful for his good sponsorship. But now to get to me. Where did I come into this little grouping? I was miserable. I was sick, sad, sorry. Him running out every single night, going to meetings, you know, coming home from work, taking showers, putting on a suit, shirt, and tie every night to go out to a meeting. You're lying to me. You're going out with other women. You can't tell me you're going to a meeting. You never got dressed for me every night. And then when he put on that foo-foo juice, you know, that really stirred things up with me because he smelled nice, he looked nice, you know. So I fought with him every night that he went to a meeting, and every night he told me the same thing. Joan, if you'd like to come with me, you can. But, you know, by then I had my second baby. 3 weeks in his sobriety, I gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. And when I awoke from delivering that baby, those years they used to shoot you to sleep. They didn't want you screaming. And I woke up from having that baby, and Joe was on one side of the bed, and Jean was on the other side of the bed. And the nurse came in carrying the baby. She says, "Who's the father?" Oh, those were the wonderful days. But, you know, 3 months later, he was getting all dolled up one night to go to a meeting, and I gave him a hard time. And he says, "Joan, come with me to the meeting." I says, "No, I won't." He says, "Whether you go with me or not, I'm going, because that's where I need to go to keep my sobriety." I didn't understand those words. But he went. And when he came home that night, he says to me, "Tomorrow night, when I come home from work," he says, "we're going to go out to dinner, and then you're going to come with me, and I'm going to take you to a meeting. It's called Al-Anon." And I says, "What's that? I don't want to join your club." And he says, "No, it's not a club, but it's a meeting for the wives of alcoholics." So he took me up to the Westchester Square group in the Bronx that night. We went to the diner first, and we went to the Westchester Square group up in the Bronx. And I walked into this room, and it was almost like the size of this room because it was a drill hall. And we walked in, and there was this man, Hank, smoking a cigar at the door. You could smoke in the meetings in those days. And then Joe introduced me, and he yelled down the hall, "Hey, Mary!" He says, "I'm calling my wife." Okay. And here comes this little Irish lady. Oh, she was so sweet, with white hair and a polka dot dress. Kathy bought me a polka dot scarf tonight because I was wearing my polka dot scarf yesterday. And I says, "It'll never match my purple outfit. The ladies will think I'm one of those people from the club that wears purple and red." I don't, whatever it is. But anyway, so there she was in a polka dot dress. And she says, "Come on with me, dearie. We're going to go downstairs to an Al-Anon meeting." "What's that?" I asked her. And she says, "Just follow me and take the cotton out of your ears and stuff it in your mouth. And listen. Listen to what you're going to hear." Now, I'm 25 years old. I don't want to hear this nonsense. And I don't want to be with all these old ladies with white hair. I'm young. But I went down and I did was I was told, you know, that good orderly direction came very early. It was like demanded of me to listen to her. And, you know, by the time the second speaker spoke that night, I figured out in my head, Joe must have come down here week after week complaining about how I'm acting at home, and now they're telling my story because they want me to belong to them. But this isn't going to happen because they're much older than me, and I don't really belong here. And Mary told me, "You have any questions after the speakers?" I said, "Yeah, I have one question." I says, "What is a sponsor?" She says, "You have one, and it's me." You know, if I would have had time and prayed for a sponsor, I would have wanted that soft, nice lady that's like Mary Jo, who speaks so sweetly, like a school teacher type, you know. But I got Mary. I love her. She told me to call her every morning at 7:30. I said, but I can't. I have a baby that I'm nursing and a little girl I'm getting off to school. She says, you have one free hand, use it. She didn't know about that short cord on the phone. She had no sympathy, you know. And then she gave me a meeting list that was half the size of this. And she says, I marked off these meetings. I want you to go to this meeting, this meeting, this meeting. I says, listen, I have 2 little children. I can't go to these meetings. She says, oh, yes, you can. These meetings are for you. It's not for anybody else but for you, and you're going to go. I says, but I don't have a car. She says, take a bus. I says, how can I get on the bus with 2 children? She said, get a sitter. I says, well, I can't afford a sitter. She says, then take them with you. But as long as you get there, somebody will take you home. There was no way out. So, good orderly direction. I had to do what I was told. But you know, something happened from that very first meeting because I also got a job at that first meeting. They gave me a service position. They made me the greeter at the door. So they signed my name to a paper that I belonged to the group and I was the greeter at the door. And you know, here I am, 48 years later, still doing service because this was the type of sponsorship that I had. She demanded me to do these things, and I did them. Isn't that wonderful? I'm so grateful for that. Really. Good old-fashioned sponsorship was the only way to go. So we worked hard. I was 3 months in program, and Mary said to me one night, she says to me, next week when you come, you're not going to be the greeter at the door. She fired me. I says, did I do something wrong? She says, no, you're going to be the chairman. Oh. I says, wow, they really know who they have here. I read that book they gave me. Al-Anon had one book then, Al-Anon Family Groups, just one. I read it from cover to cover. And I read other things that they gave me, all the pamphlets. I think we had 10 pamphlets then. I read them all, backwards and forward. I says, wow, now they want me to be the chairman. So that whole week I went looking in Robert Hall clothes and all the other places for a polka dot dress because I wanted to be part of this group of women. I could never find that polka dot dress, but I found a polka dot blouse, you know. And I went up the following week and I got there an hour early and Mary was there. And she says, oh, you're here early, dearie. I says, yeah, well, you have to tell me what I'm going to read. Like Mary Jo read tonight, the opening, what I'm going to read and how to open up the meeting, you know. What are you talking about? I says, you said I'm going to be the chairman. She says, that's right, dearie. You see those chairs over there? You're going to line them up. You're going to line them up in rows of 10. Okay? Ego. She knew I had an ego. Easing God out. When we have an ego and our head is so big, we're not looking at anything but ourselves and who we are. Like I said, wow, she really knows who she's got here. No, she didn't know who she knew that I was full of ego and she had to work on me, and that's what she did. And that was wonderful. That's what a good sponsor is today. A sponsor can look at a person and tell them without hurting their feelings. She never hurt my feelings, you know. I did as I was told, but you know what? She set up those chairs with me. She worked right alongside of me and set up those chairs. So that's what good sponsorship is. As time went on, you know, we worked very hard on the steps of the program. We didn't have the step books that we have today. We have wonderful conference-approved literature today. I'm so grateful and happy for that. When I was a delegate and I served at the World Service Conference for 3 years and saw how the literature committee worked, it made me so proud to be an Al-Anon member. So proud, because we also came out with a new book the following year on grief. And it was something that I was dealing with. So I used it very, very well. I even sent in some articles. So anyway, time went on. And we went on, too, having babies. You know, when the alcoholic gets sober, boy, they look handsomer. They looked taller. I could even start wearing heels then. You know, they were better and better. And we worked very hard on our marriage. We made a commitment. Both of us made a commitment to ourselves to work on ourselves, not to work on each other, but to work on ourselves. Joe kept his program, AA, and I kept my program, Al-Anon. And we blended together once a week when we go to an AA meeting together. I would go to an open AA meeting, or he would come with me to anniversaries. We were always very supportive of one another. And it says that in our opening. You know, we do help our alcoholics. It says that in our steps. We have to help one another. We never lied to our children. We never said to the children, oh, we're going shopping tonight, or we're going to go visit Aunt Millie or Tilly. We told them. We went to Al-Anon meetings. We would go to Al-Anon meetings, and we would take them to anniversaries. It was very important that we shared our program with our children and our family. It tells us that in our 12th step in all our affairs. So life became a honey. Life became a honey. That what could have been the worst nightmare of my life was a God-given peace to both of us. I worked on getting God back in my life. That was pretty easy. You know, he never really left me. I had to remember that all the time. I was the one that walked away from him and turned my back. He was there all the time, so I had to remember just to call on him like I do every day, every day. When I started working on my steps, I looked at those first 3 steps and got very frightened. But, you know, they're very simply laid out to me today with 3 words: admit, believe, and decide. The first step is admit. I'm admitted I'm powerless. The second step, I believe there is a God greater than myself, a power greater than myself. And to decide. Each and every morning, I make a decision to turn my life, what is my life, and my will, what is my will, my thoughts and my actions, over to the care of God as I understand him. And I understand him to be the most loving, patient God of all. And he's with me each and every day. By the time my son Joseph was 17, my oldest boy, we found that he had a disease. Well, I didn't know it was a disease then, but he drank a lot of beer. He was coming home drunk, senior in high school. When he graduated from high school, he decided not to go to college. He wanted to join the Marines. And Joe says to me, this will be good for him. He's not college material right now. But when he came home from the Marines, he was dually addicted. And what happened was that disease walked right into my front door. Right into the front door. And, oh God, it ripped our family apart, as the disease does. With me and Al-Anon, Joe and AA, that disease ripped us apart. And we had to set some boundaries. Boundaries is a big word that we use in Al-Anon. We talk about it all the time. And we finally got to the point where we said, you know, Joe said to me, maybe we're going to have to give some tough love. I says, well, if it's in my Al-Anon book, I'll be able to do it. But if it's not in my Al-Anon book, I can't do it. That was my escape, my denial. I wasn't ready to do it yet. So I went on a few more months, and much more pain, and much more things being stolen, and much more money, and much more trouble, and I don't have to tell you. Today I'm a member of the Al-Anon Family group in East Northport Parents Group. We meet on Wednesday night, and it's the best little Al-Anon group that I know of other than yours. I know you have great ones too. But it's a wonderful parent group. And every parent that sits in that room, there's sometimes 50 of us on a Wednesday night, we all have children with alcohol or drug problems. And that's what it is today. But we can all come together and, you know, talk about the solutions. The solutions are all in our Al-Anon books. So we finally decided to give tough love, and we asked our son to leave the house. He was very flustered over this, and he said he can't do it alone. We told him he had to, so we had to put him out. It wasn't easy. I figured he'd be home the next day because it was Sunday, and I always served Italian food on Sunday. But he wasn't allowed in if he was drinking or drugging. And when Joseph left the house, he lived out on the streets for 3 years. 3 years is a long time, a long time. And when I think of those times that he could have died, so many times he could have died. He went into rehabs a few times. And every time he'd come out, he'd do the same thing over and over again. You know, that definition of insanity. And, you know, we would expect him to do something different, but he didn't. He'd do the same thing over and over again and get drunk again. And after 3 years, he finally did make a decision to do something about himself. I always wanted Joe to be his sponsor, but he says, Joan, I can't. He's my son. I have to let the other men handle him. It's a tough thing. But they did, and he came in. And my son Joe, I'm so proud to say, joined Alcoholics Anonymous, went back to school. I'm a nurse. None of my daughters became a nurse, but my son Joe became a nurse. How beautiful that was. How beautiful. And he went back to school and he became this nurse, and he stayed in recovery, and he was in recovery 11 years. And Joe was at work one night, and he came off his shift at night and walked out to his car, and there was a couple of cats sitting on his car. And Joe suffered from asthma all of his life and bad allergies. And he was not attacked, but spat on by the cats and got the venom in the port of entry was his eyes, as the doctor explained to us, and he went into anaphylactic shock. And he died from anaphylactic shock in the hospital that he worked in. It was a tragic time. Oh boy, to lose a child is the worst thing that could happen to you. And I was devastated, and I didn't know what to do with my feelings and my emotions, but I ran to Al-Anon family groups. I also had a wonderful neighbor that lost a child, and she took me to another program that I can expel my feelings on, you know. But at that time, I spent a lot of time writing in my diaries and journals, and I wrote a story. And I wrote a story, and I sent it into the forum about losing a child and staying in recovery and working on myself and getting busy in service and, you know, doing what I used to do. And about a month or so after the article was published, it was published by the Forum magazine, a wonderful magazine. If you don't get it in your groups, order it. Subscribe for yourself. I get one every month. I got a letter from the World Service Office, and they said, there's this woman from Massachusetts that's looking to get in touch with you, but we wouldn't give her your name and address, so we'll give you hers. And there she is sitting over there tonight, Pat Tatro, from Massachusetts, from your hometown. And I called Pat. And oh God, we talked for hours, and we wrote how many letters, Pat? A lot of letters. I still have mine home. We shared our feelings. We shared our experience, strength, and hope, you know. And when I walked out into the ladies' room today, there's Pat coming out of the ladies' room. She's, Joan, I couldn't believe it's going to be you that's the speaker tonight. Isn't God good with his God incidences? You see that he sends Pat here tonight, you know. And so there she is. And like a few months later, 6 or 7 months later, Joe and I were called to speak up in Toronto at a conference. And Pat and her husband came up for the weekend and spent the weekend with us at the conference. And we were talking before how much fun we had at breakfast and at our meals, you know, and how I used to steal Joe's Danish all the time. Oh, this was my way. That's why I look like I do. But anyway, that's what happens when we're at Al-Anon and we work our program. So, you know, I lost a child. It was the worst thing, but I went for help. Because Al-Anon teaches me to reach out and to go for help. No matter what happens to me, no matter what adversity in life happens to me, there's always a planned program of recovery somewhere. But I find it, Al-Anon structures the way. Al-Anon leads me to those things. Al-Anon shows me the way. The 12 steps will show me the way for myself for recovery. The traditions used in the household is wonderful. Our children, when they were growing up, our son Michael used to make fun of us all the time. He used to say to us, my God, what do you have, the traditions in invisible handwriting on the wall that you use on us all the time? But you know what? Today they're grown men and women with their own grown children. They use them too. Whether they realize it or not, they're using them too. So that's what happens, you know. We both stayed very busy in Al-Anon and AA, working our own programs, making many, many friends throughout our travels, throughout our Because when you're active in program and you're active in service, you meet more and more people. You know, and 7 years ago, the kids were after us to sell our house in Franklin Square and come move out to Suffolk County, which is another county about 25, 30 miles further out. And we did. Good orderly direction. We did as we were told by the kids. And we bought a beautiful brand new townhouse. And we were invited to Hawaii. The day after we moved, we were invited to Hawaii to speak at a convention. And Glenn came, met us at the airport. He was there taping. And he took this beautiful picture of Joe and myself and Tina and 3 other gals and guys that were our sponsees. They went with us on this excursion for 2 weeks. And Glenn took our picture. And I never saw that picture. And when Tina came to the house to pick me up yesterday morning, that was what she was trying to give me, because she made a big 8x10 of it, one of our people did, and put it in a frame for me. And when we got to the hotel here, before we got out, I says, Tina, where's that package? It was in the trunk? She says, no, it's right here. And she reached in the back seat and she gave it to me. And there was this beautiful picture that Glenn took of the 6 of us when we stepped off the plane in Hawaii with the lays on us. And when I walked in the hotel lobby after registering yesterday, and I walked down here to the table, who greeted me but Glenn? A God incident, another God incident. God sends me so many incidences. But you know, we came home from Hawaii on April 16th, and a month later, May 16th, Joe passed away from a massive coronary. He was 68 years old. We were just in our brand new home, still boxes to unpack. And I looked up and I said, okay, God, you have something else now that I have to go through. I have to climb another mountain. I have to run another hill. There's a wonderful song out by Miley Cyrus right now that talks about that. I love Miley Cyrus, girls. I have my granddaughter Sarah's message on my answering machine right now, my cell phone. Hi, Nana. I want to go see that new picture with Miley Cyrus. Will you take me? Because I know you love her too. And I went last Saturday night with Sarah and her mommy. I do things like that today. I play in the sand with my grandchildren, and we build sand castles. You know, we go fishing off the pier. It's wonderful. When my oldest grandson graduated from the Naval Academy 4 years ago, I flew out to Chicago to watch my other sailor graduate from the Naval Academy in his Navy whites, and I sat there in tears. And I have that picture home, too. God is so good to me. Your God is so good to you, too. We all have the same God, you know. And that's why we're all here, because God loves us so much. He gave us this wonderful, wonderful fellowship to follow, this wonderful program of recovery. And all we have to do is have the willingness to put it into action, to take it one day at a time. I only live one day at a time. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. That's why they call it the present. The present that we get is just for today. Every day I open up a new present, a new day, a new life, a new job to do. A telephone will ring and somebody will call and they'll need help. Boy, I'm ready to give it. I'm there and ready to give it. I've served on so many committees and went so many places, and I'm still eager to learn. If you have somebody that needs help, reach out and touch someone. And the most important person in your life is God. And the second most important person is your sponsor. If you don't have a sponsor, shame on you. While you're here this weekend, ask somebody to sponsor you. And ask them to get you into the steps. Working on the steps is the most precious gift you can give yourself. I thank you so much for listening, you know. Al-Anon has given me the hope to go on, the faith to believe, the courage to change, the love that carries me through. But most of all, Al-Anon gives me back my life. Thank you, God, for Al-Anon, and thank you, Al-Anon, for God. I have one wish for all of you tonight. For those of you who came here tonight seeking recovery, God grant that you find it. For those of you who came to maintain your recovery, God grant that you keep it. because it's the most precious gift you'll ever receive. Thank you for listening. Did I do an hour? Did I do an hour? I hope you did. Yeah. Thank you.